Hello and welcome in to another edition of the FanTC Football Pod, coming at you today with Kody and Eric. We are doing a little running back disagreements episode. Boys, how are we doing on this late Tuesday evening?
We doing pretty good. Kind of tired, so trying to keep with your numbers fast when you're going at me today.
We just recorded our NFL news and notes update, so we are probably going to be a little quicker on the jump here than we are normally. Let's just get right into the hot takes, boys. Cody, go ahead and go first.
I'm actually going to send it over to Eric. I'm going to put him on the spot with his.
Oh, seriously, dude? Oh, God. All right. I'm going to rip this straight off of an article I read a couple days ago. The NFL should implement a separate salary cap exclusively for quarterbacks because every cap jump that the NFL has had in the past few years has basically been dedicated exclusively to quarterbacks.
Okay. I'd like to see how that would work. I think it's a decent idea.
I don't know how it would work either, is the issue.
There's a lot of accounting and math on the back end that have to account into that hot take, but I actually like it. I think that could be a good point. I think they have a much better opportunity at being able to form something like that than running backs do, who have been kind of trying to get paid via some kind of way that way, which then frees up. I mean, right? What's Herbert's per year? Is he over 50 or something like that? So frees up that 50. Much money on an annual basis is a lot of money for other positions. So that's kind of a cool thought. A lot of accounting and numbers in the background that other people can deal with.
Cody, you want me to go?
Yep, let's hear yours.
All right, you're not going to love this one, but I think Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are in the wrong order on most Dynasty boards. I think Jamar Chase should be the number one overall player in Dynasty and in redraft, in my opinion. I think I have him number one over Jefferson for this year and long term. Obviously, long term because of his connection with Joe Burrow, but this year, again, I think he's probably just a little bit of a better player, and he's got a better quarterback with most likely a better offense as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate it because I think you're right on a long-term basis. There's a really good chance Kirk Cousins is not the Vikings quarterback unless there's a big jump in off-season success this year. So I'd imagine they're not going to want to pay him another multi-year, fully guaranteed contract like he's been getting, especially at the rate quarterbacks are going. So, yeah, I like your hot take there. I think if you've got the 101, the only reason I don't love going Chase over Jefferson is I would love to find ways to stack Chase and Burrow because I think if you can find a way to do that, that is just such a good team. But in some drafts, well, I guess more in best ball. I guess in redraft, there's a good chance you could get him in the fourth, depending on how your leagues draft quarterbacks. But he's on that Lamar Jackson level where if there's someone who had really good success with him in your league last year, they may just take him right back up with an earlier pick. So that's my only disagreement is I can't stack him with Burrow as easy as I'd like to, but yeah, Chase is awesome.
Yeah, definitely easier to stack Jefferson with Cousins.
So I ran some numbers. I ran some numbers on the Bengals wide receivers, both with both of them and without each other. Jamar Chase without T. Higgins is so freaking good. It's unbelievable. If T. Higgins is either traded or is not there in 2 years, Jamar Chase is going to be by far the number one wide receiver you'd want on your team. So I like it, especially from a long-term basis, because I don't think they'll find a way to pay both wide receivers personally.
Yeah, I don't think they should. I think they can still have an effective offense with Jamar Chase as the alpha and then, filling out the rest, maybe add some more pieces to the defense. But we'll see what they end up doing there. All right, guys. We are going to.
Cody has to give his hot take. You can't just throw me on.
Oh, sorry. Man. Excuse me.
So this is. I would say this is probably a little bit of a hot take, but I think the game day experience you have with a group of guys, either at a bar or at someone's house or something like that, where you have multiple TVs, you have red zone going. Mostly, if it's with fantasy, guys you're in a league with, so you're talking shit, just trounces going to a game live as an overall experience. I enjoy the games going live. I love going at least once a year because, especially if I can find a way to do it on a Thursday or a Monday where it's just better and I don't have to miss all the other games. But I love consuming as much football as possible, it seems like, on Sundays. And sometimes if I go to a Chiefs game, it just seems like I get home and I'm like, I have a whole nother like day's worth of football I have to catch back up onto. So, hot take, I would much rather, not much rather, but I would rather stay home, watch the game in that kind of a setting than go to the stadium.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider this.
I think I would agree with you.
That is far, far superior, especially on an NFL Sunday, like you said, Monday, Thursday, maybe, or Sunday night.
Football for sure. Other sports I could argue against, but football, there's nothing like you said, having red zone on with all your guys shooting the shit about your fantasy teams.
Yeah, I would never buy season tickets to a team, even if I was living in Denver and I could go to my favorite team every weekend. Just no, thank you.
I agree.
Much rather be at a bar, like you said, watching all the games. All right, boys, let's jump into these running backs.
Hard stop.
I actually kind of like that. That drop is like meant to be cutting someone off, so I'm legitimately okay with that.
I was gonna say I'm gonna try and use those a little more this year, so you're gonna have to get used to it. Sorry,
roll through it.
Yeah. All right, guys. So we have 5 players here today. We've had 4 the past 2 because of the smaller position groups of quarterback and tight end, but today we have 5, so we will have a winner. Me and Kody have split both the quarterback and the tight end 2-2. Again, for those of you who may not have seen the last 2 episodes, we are going to argue 5 different running backs we have rankings disagreements on. Obviously, one of us is higher, one of us is lower on that player. Eric, being the impartial observer, will rule on whose argument is better. And then, again, we'll tally them up at the end and see who wins. Pretty simple concept. I think everyone's on board. Kody, you have 3 of your guys that you're arguing in the affirmative. I have 2 guys I'm arguing in the affirmative. I want to just throw that out there in case I lose. That is already just a point in Cody's favor. It's easier to argue.
I want to actually let everyone know that Nick actually said that 3 out of these 5 he's extremely confident on. So.
Oh yes, I absolutely am.
Yeah.
I will still take full credit for winning if I do. So don't worry about that.
Of course.
But Kody, we are going to start out with Rhamondre Stevenson. He is your guy. You have him ranked number 9. I have him at 13. Not a huge difference. The rest of these guys will actually have fairly large differences on, but being ranked that highly, that difference kind of makes, is a little more stark. And I think 13, personally, I will get this out of the way early. 13, I could see moving Stevenson down pretty easily if the Patriots do make a move at running back. So I think 13 is probably my high point for Stevenson. But anyway, Kody, go ahead with your argument on why we should draft Rhamondre Stevenson 9th overall at the running back position.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the 9th overall running back's going just around the 2-3 turn, maybe just into the mid-early 3rd round. So that's where we're looking at with Rhamondre. I have him right around his NFC ADP, so that makes me feel pretty good about where I have him at, just based on the drafts that have happened and the way that they weight their drafts. For me, it's also pretty clear the Patriots are going to add another running back. If it's Zeke, Fournette, or Darrell Henderson, he may go down a couple of other guys. Like I'm high on like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon may jump him just because of opportunity around the red zone that Rhamondre may not have anymore. But as long as it's not like a guy like Dalvin Cook who can actually come in and challenge him for 50% of the workload, I think he's going to be definitely the 3rd down back, and he's going to have the majority of carries. The only concern you'd have is around the goal line with Zeke or Fournette, because they're basically built like LeGarrette Blount at this point in their careers. But more on Fournette in particular, he kind of broke out last year. Going back to 2 years ago, he was kind of Damian Harris's, not backup. He kind of started breaking a little bit more towards 50-50. Going into last year, it was very tough to rate these guys because they were both kind of looking about 50-50. Harris injury, Rhamondre took over. I think he was very good once he took over completely. In the entirety of last season, he finished as an RB2 or better in 71% of games. So that means 71% of the time he gave you a week that's going to help you win your game. And an RB1 or better 35% of the time, which isn't a lot, but where he's going, you don't necessarily have to draft him as your RB1. Or if you do, you have a Jefferson or Chase combined with Jalen Waddle or T. Higgins, maybe something like that. Like you have 2 elite level wide receivers if he's your RB1. So I think at that point, you're kind of building your team very well. And again, I think he is a little bit like, for me when I'm looking at him in drafts, I think some of the other guys around him I may feel a little bit more comfortable with as a true RB1 on your team. But I think if you're drafting, if you get a CMC early, you get a Jalen Waddle falls to you in the second, and then you can add Rhamondre as your RB2. I just think that you're going to have an advantage at running back just about every week. So I would happily take him at the ninth. Like I said, I love him a little bit more as my second running back just because I think his upside is going to be a little bit capped. But they still haven't signed anyone yet. Even if they do, I still think he's the clear number one. But if you get him as your RB2, I think that's a league-winning running back core.
I like your points. I will say off the jump that this is probably my least favorite guy to argue against of your three, just because I like him as a player. I think he's pretty good. He's a great runner. Not as great of a pass catcher efficiency-wise. I'll get to that again in a minute. The other thing I wanted to mention, not only to slightly torpedo your argument, but also just as a disclaimer as we move on here, is that I think a lot of these ADPs are going to rise as far as the running backs are concerned in the overall ranks. These ADPs are based off NFC ADP, like we said. These are a lot of best ball leagues. Best ball leagues are about hitting the home run. So wide receivers get pushed up, running backs get pushed down, especially guys like Rhamondre Stevenson that are a little safer, like Kody said. So I would expect him to be going closer to the end of the second round in most home league drafts, maybe even the mid-second round in drafts, again, especially like non-PPR drafts that running backs get, again, pushed up in those type of drafts. We'll see where he ends up in a couple weeks. I think we'll have a better idea of the ADP in mid-August. But again, I think I just wanted to throw that out there for all these guys. I think they will rise in their overall ADP a little bit from what we have right now. But anyway, the reason I am a little softer on Stevenson than you are, he was the RB11 in points per game last season in half PPR, low-end RB1, pretty solid year. I think that's probably about his ceiling, though. I think a lot of things went right for him. He had 88 targets and 69 receptions last year. No one saw that coming from him. Did not profile as a pass catcher coming out of college. Out of necessity, I think, more so than necessarily what their plan going into the year was. Only had 4.8 yards per target. That's not a great number for a running back. This is, again, okay, so I've got some numbers coming at you, Eric. I need you to listen. Shout out to FFT, Fantasy Football Today, great podcast. Heath Cummings is the guy that gave me these stats. So he is the 8th running back since 2000 to see 80-plus targets in a season and averaged less than 5 yards per target. Tiki Barber in 03 saw 19 fewer targets the next year. Michael Pittman in 03 saw 56 fewer targets the next year. Reggie Bush in 07 saw 25 fewer targets the next year. Darren Sproles in 15, 12 fewer targets. Carlos Hyde in 2017, 72 fewer targets. Tariq Cohen in 2019 got hurt before the year started. And most recently, Najee Harris in 2021 saw 41 fewer targets the next season. We've seen a lot of steam, like Kody said, about other backs being brought in, about third down backs being used. I think it's probably partially because of these efficiency issues, and none of these options are good if that does happen. Leonard Fournette, like you said, pass-catching guy, pass-protecting guy. I think he would take away from his third down role. Ezekiel Elliott, goal line specialist, and then Dalvin Cook would just completely crater his value. So hopefully for Rhamondre Stevenson owners, none of those three things happens, but I think it's very likely one of them does, and that's why I'd be a little bit colder on Stevenson than you would.
All right, got a little bit of a rebuttal, not too much. I think your argument is valid for why you'd be concerned about him. One, I know because you brought up the ADP, Eric, I just want to remind you last night you drafted him in the 4th spot of the 3rd round, so He is still falling that far in a 12-man half PPR league, so there is still potential for him to get there, like I said, where you get like a Chase and a Jalen Waddle like you did, and then you add Rhamondre as your RB1.
I like that team a lot.
Yeah. But also one thing I do want to point out, like all the other running backs that Nick did mention, none of them had Bill Belichick as a head coach. I think that he is very well known as being able to find what players can do best and using them to their best ability. And maybe he unlocked something in Rhamondre that other coaches did not fully unlock last year. You don't just get 88 targets and was it 69 receptions, right?
69 receptions.
So, I mean, yeah, he has talent. He's a pass-catching running back. Not a pass-catching running back, but he has talent catching the ball out of the backfield. You would like him to be able to get more than that. Honestly, I don't think he's the most fluid-looking runner. He reminds me a little bit of Maurice Jones-Drew. He kind of like a bowling ball style runner. He doesn't really make people miss as much. He kind of goes through. So that may be a little bit of the issue with him catching the ball out of the backfield. He doesn't have that quick twitch, make people miss ability. But like I said, I think for where you're getting him in a draft, where you're, when you look at the other running backs you're drafting around him right now, he just provides a safe, running back floor that you really can't beat. Like I said, the upside may ultimately be capped, but if you draft him as your running back 9 and he finishes as the running back 9, you're getting equal value. You're not upset with that by the end of the season. He probably provided for you, and you're overall happy with the way that pick turned out.
Real quick on the Bill Belichick point, I think you'd be equally concerned by the fact that basically all of his teams have used running back by committee throughout the years, especially his better ones. And for whatever he unlocked with Rhamondre Stevenson, he was not good at pass catching. 88 targets and 4.8 yards per target is a below average number. And I think a good coach like Bill Belichick would see that. Well, yes, absolutely. But I think he would see that and try to improve upon it. So I think based on the numbers that I gave with all of the previous running backs, you would expect those targets to come down. Therefore, his floor will be a little bit lower week to week, and he's going to need to either increase the touchdown total or increase the efficiency on the targets that he does get to make up the difference.
How many touchdowns did he have last year? Somebody have that in front of him?
6. 5 rushing, 1 receiving.
Yep.
There's room for that for the rest of the way.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry, Eric, do you have any other questions? My apologies.
No, does it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you want another drum roll, or do you just want to do your answer? Let's give you another drum roll. That's sorry. That was
give it to me again. I am going to side slightly with Nick here, and it's because I do kind of believe what he said about those receptions going down, just the guys they've brought in and talked to this offseason. It seems like they're trying to take a little bit of that pass-catching role away from him. I could still see him getting maybe 65, 70 targets, but I don't think he's going to be up in the 80, 90s this year. And I could see him getting more touchdowns, but I could also see more of their touchdowns getting yanked. I don't think they're going to be a particularly good offense. So I would take guys like Nick has them listed here that are in between 9 and 13 for him. I would take probably Josh Jacobs, assuming the JT contract.
I have Jacobs higher than him, so I 100% would too. Yeah,
but I think there are some other options that I would go with, and so I am going to give the edge to Nick here.
That is fair. I also forgot to make my point that they actually have an offensive coordinator this year, also, which gives me at least a little bit more hope that there's at least going to be some kind of competence on that offense.
No double jeopardy here in the fantasy court, so unfortunately all rulings are final. All right.
All right.
We're going to go ahead and move on to Jamhyr Gibbs, my boy. This one actually we have a very large disparity on. So I have him at 11. Kody has him at 23, big-time Jamhyr Gibbs hater here. ADP has him at 12 overall right now, early 4th round. Again, probably going to creep up into more of the late 3rd, mid-3rd, potentially when draft season really kicks off, especially redraft season. But anyway, Jamhyr Gibbs. Alrighty, so this is actually kind of serendipitous that I did some research for Ken Walker. I went back and looked at basically every first and second round running back. I was trying to make myself feel better about his prospects this year. But in doing so, I have inadvertently done some research for Jamhyr Gibbs here. So we have had 13 first round running backs in the past 10 years since 2012. And 10 of those 13 guys have beaten their ADP, boys and girls. And I'm actually going to run through the guys that did not beat their ADP. I think it kind of helps make my point. Melvin Gordon was the one true bust. This is 2015. He was 15th overall. He was ADP RB20. He finished at RB52. He scored 0 touchdowns in 12 games. The team was 4-12. He just had a really bad year. That was the one that you can just point out and say he was just a complete bust. And he was being drafted with some value, maybe not as high as Jamhyr Gibbs, but he totally busted out, and I will admit that one. Another one that did not beat his ADP, Christian McCaffrey. drafted as overall RB14, finished as RB15. So when he didn't beat his ADP, still finished with a very solid year. I think Christian McCaffrey's year is actually a great comp for Jamhyr Gibbs. I believe this is what you're looking at as a floor. He had only 117 carries over a full 16-game season, but he also had 113 targets and 80 catches. That is very similar to what we'd expect from Jamhyr Gibbs, just profile-wise. Maybe not 113 targets, but probably more than 117 carries. I think it probably evens out. And I do want to get to this, actually. I'm going to get to this point after the Christian McCaffrey point. It's DeAndre Swift's role that he's replacing. DeAndre Swift, even with all of the injury concerns he had last year and all of the games where he was basically playing, 30, 40% of the snaps because he was battling injuries, he was on pace for 120 carries and 85 targets in 2022. I think Jamhyr Gibbs steps into that role plus some because, again, he is going to be a young number 12 overall pick that is stepping into a good offense that they, again, paid a very large price to acquire. 7 of 14 games DeAndre Swift played, he had 10 or fewer opportunities. I don't expect many games Jamhyr Gibbs starts and finishes him to have fewer than 10 opportunities. So I think he could easily, put 30, 40 carries on that 120 total and maybe even 15 to 20 targets. And then you're talking about 250 opportunities and 100 targets. That is going to get him into the top 15 easily with upside for more. And the last guy that did not beat ADP, that is your boy, Kody, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was the 32nd overall pick. He was ADP RB8. He finished RB22. Actually finished a little bit higher in a per-game basis. If you remember, he got hurt after 12 games that year. Again, just has not really panned out as the level of player we thought he was, but this is the 32nd overall pick in the draft, not the 12th overall pick in the draft. Any guy drafted higher than 15th, we can go down the list here. Let me see. So Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey. Again, like I said, he missed ADP by 1. Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Trent Richardson. All of them beat their ADPs, and all of them had significant ADPs in the top 20. Every one of them beat them. Jamhyr Gibbs going 12 right now. Love the talent, love the situation. I think he is worth the pick at RB11.
Can you go through those lists of names of running backs that did beat their ADP? I know.
Sure.
Zeke,
okay, so
Todd
2021 Najee Harris, his ADP was RB10. He finished RB4. Josh Jacobs, RB16 ADP, finished RB14, 2019. Sony Michel was RB35 in ADP, finished RB28. Rashad Penny,
Michel, he retired.
Rashad Penny was the last one that did not meet his ADP, but he was a backup all season. Chris Carson started over him. But he was also ADP RB33, so he was a very late round pick, finished RB65. Saquon, ADP RB5, finished RB2. Leonard Fournette, ADP RB11, finished RB8. Ezekiel Elliott, ADP RB3, finished RB2. Todd Gurley, RB26, finished RB5. Doug Martin, shout out, a muscle hamster, ADP RB14, finished RB2. Trent Richardson, ADP RB15, finished RB9.
Okay.
That's the list.
Yep. So I do appreciate you bringing that list because I was going to look that up and then I decided against it and went a different route with my argument. But with that list, that basically here's going to be my argument for Jamhyr Gibbs. And it's kind of just the last argument we had about Rhamondre Stevenson. And he doesn't even have a second running back on his team yet. We're talking about Zeke, Fournette, or Darrell Henderson potentially signing there to affect his value. Whereas Jamhyr Gibbs already has a proven NFL running back and a fantasy running back who finishes as an RB2 or better every year of his career in David Montgomery. So we are at RB9. We're saying that's too early because he could have someone take goal line opportunities or another role from him. But Jamhyr Gibbs at 12, who already has a guy who's going to do that from week 1, is a 100% acceptable pick. All these guys you listed that did, Harris, Zeke, Gurley, Jacobs, Michel, Fournette, and Saquon, were all, I don't think Michel, but all basically drafted, I think, within the top 5 or 6 picks also. So they were their clear number 1 on their team, which I think Gibbs may be by some point in the season, but it won't be as
Harris
early
was 24th.
as expected. Who?
Same with Jacobs. Jacobs and Harris were 24th overall, but the other guys were top
Zeke,
5.
Gurley, Saquon, Fournette, yeah. And on top of it, they just didn't have an RB2 that was going to potentially take away nearly as much opportunity as David Montgomery just clearly will. In a season where you'd probably look back, Eric, I don't mean to bring this up in my argument, but in a season where you traded him for Saquon, you probably look back on it as a disappointment. Finished as an RB2. Where he was getting drafted was basically an RB2. So he's always lived up to the value in fantasy that he gets drafted by. I think he's going to surpass it this year because they already dug out a role last year where they had a goal line guy that David Montgomery can slide into. I think they're going to love Jamhyr Gibbs a lot more than DeAndre Swift, don't get me wrong. But if we're drafting a guy at number 12 that I don't have confidence is going to guaranteed to get more than 50% of the snaps, then I think that's just a very, very risky pick. I mean, that's a third-round pick where we're talking about Rhamondre may only get 70%, but we're looking at Gibbs who may be leaning closer to 50. So that is my concern with Gibbs. That's why I have him ranked below guys who I think are just truly either their team's number one or are going to get the workload in the first few weeks that make that draft pick valuable.
So, quick rebuttal. I actually have Montgomery at 18. So I clearly think they can both be very successful in this offense. Yep. We could have easily done a disagreement on David Montgomery, actually, because you have him at 27. But I felt like it was a little counterintuitive to do two guys on the same team because we were going to kind of make a lot of the same points, I feel
Same arguments.
But yeah, I think the Rhamondre comparison is just not there because Detroit is going to be a far, far better offense with way more points to offer than the New England Patriots are going to give you, with a defense that's going to give up a lot of points on the back end that will, again, in turn, make Jamhyr Gibbs a lot more necessary than maybe Rhamondre Stevenson will in the games that his team wins. And last point here, again, I think, like you said, he does have a backfield mate that is going to get a lot of work and probably the goal line work, but we saw that with DeAndre Swift last year too, and he was still, again, pacing for 120 carries and 85 targets. I've already laid out why I think Jamhyr Gibbs can exceed those totals. Jamal Williams had 17 touchdowns on the ground last year, and DeAndre Swift still was pacing for these totals. And again, I think Jamhyr Gibbs is only going to build off of that, maybe throw him a couple of those touchdowns that Jamal Williams got. David Montgomery, shave him down to the 10 or 12, and you have room for a really, really exciting back. Again, I think in half and full PPR, that is a very important thing to consider here. I would take Montgomery over Gibbs in a non-PPR situation, but half and full PPR, I love the upside of Jamhyr Gibbs. He is very explosive talent. They took him 12th overall, and these guys just beat their ADP consistently.
Yep. When they have the opportunity, I do agree with you. I just think that the opportunity cost is way too scary right there for me. I can draft basically at the time of the draft, Rhamondre and Gibbs, I guarantee are going right next to each other in drafts. And I just think that there's a chance that there's a floor with Gibbs that we do not know yet because we have not ever seen him. He is a rookie. And again, he does have a running back who's going to take opportunities from him. So, yeah, I mean, we can look back on DeAndre Swift last season all we want to, but it's a completely different player. We could think their offense is going to be completely the same, but David Montgomery doesn't have the same exact skill set as Jamal Williams does, so it's going to look a little bit different. I don't think we can just automatically assume those roles for those two guys, but that's the end of my argument. Nick, any final points, or Eric, any questions?
Last point I will make is that I believe that's where the Christian McCaffrey comparison really comes in, for me as far as why I'm comfortable where I'm drafting Gibbs, because he had Jonathan Stewart his rookie year, took basically all of the carries from the Carolina Panthers, still finished at RB15. McCaffrey had 3.7 yards per attempt, was a horribly inefficient rusher, but lived off of that passing work that Jamhyr Gibbs is going to get, and again, finished as the RB15 overall, a very solid year.
All right. Any questions, Eric?
I do not have any questions. I'm going to go with Kody here. Sorry about you, Nick. I think I'd probably go somewhere in the middle, but I'm definitely closer to Kody. I think that Montgomery brings a lot more to the passing game than Jamal Williams did, so I don't think that's exclusively going to be Jamhyr Gibbs. I think he'll definitely get a large majority of it, but one of the things Montgomery was best at when he was with the Bears was pass protection, and in general, rookie running backs struggle with that a lot, so I don't think he'll have complete control of that third down role. And then just the guy, I would probably trust Mixon, Sanders, and I don't know what Jones that is because my brain is dumb, and Ken Walker over Gibbs at this point. Okay, yeah, and Aaron Jones. Yep, thank you, Kody. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that there is upside there. I think the ceiling or the floor is a little bit too low for me, given the unknowns about how that
Gibbs
workload
is
is
for
going to be
sure a
split.
guy you draft, he hits, and you talk about Jamhyr Gibbs for
Can
forever.
Yeah.
Like that's like you're telling.
What do you
your
think
Jahmyr
about
Gibbs story.
the first round running backs beating their ADPs consistently? How do you combat that argument?
I
Me?
again,
Yeah,
I
you.
when we Eric, okay.
Most like the only one that did split carries, like you said, was McCaffrey, and Jonathan Stewart probably caught like 4 balls the entire year. I just don't think that he's gonna like. I think that that's gonna be more split than you realize. They paid a lot of money to
That
David Montgomery too.
that was
Like the
that was
only
the
running
one
back that got a
argument.
multi-year extension this offseason.
Yeah, that was the one
Yeah,
argument I
and then
had. Like
Miles
the
Sanders.
biggest thing trying to find something to combat was the fact that he is a first round running back, and they almost do always outperform their ADP. That's why I just had to
We shall
ride
see.
the opportunity cost. But back to me, back to me rooting for a Bronco. So buckle in, folks. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm okay winning or losing this one.
Yeah. Okay. So we already talked about it in our news and notes. If you haven't taken a look at that episode, that was posted on Wednesday. Check it out on YouTube or the podcast platform. But James Palmer, he's a Denver guy. He reported that Javonte Williams has not been limited in any capacity so far in camp. He is looking to. Has a scheduled day off tomorrow, but says he will be in pads doing sideline work. So even on a scheduled day off, he's feeling healthy enough to be out there and at least getting some kind of work in. So even though that's not all the way out there, it's still better than J.K. Dobbins' situation, who isn't even coming off an injury. So my biggest thing for Javonte Williams right now, which is definitely going to change by the time drafts come around, maybe I'll fall a little bit further on him, but just the opportunity at where you could draft him is unreal. I mean, you're getting a guy who sharing the field last year in a pretty cruddy offense was finishing as a running back 2 with 0 touchdowns multiple weeks before his injury. He's a guy who is now going to be in the Sean Payton offense, who has made fantasy running backs elite in the past. We do have Samaje Perine, who's been a career backup to this point, but did show some flashes at the end of Cincinnati. I do think the Sean Payton running back scheme can have 2 fantasy valuable running backs at different levels. That's not saying anything, but I think where you're getting Javonte, you can take a risk of him having a down week because Perine gets the touchdown. Whereas when you're looking at drafting guys in the 3rd or 4th round that you want to be the number 1 guy, like I said, basically my thought process here, why I have him a little bit higher also is just the draft value is insane for me. I mean, you're drafting him as right now as basically your 3rd or 4th running back on your team, and he has – I mean, if he didn't get hurt last year, I know the big hype was on Breece Hall, but I think Javonte Williams would have eventually taken over that backfield on a pretty rough offense and really shown out with it. And I think he probably would be going as a top 18 running back, which I believe is right about where I have him ranked. I have him at 17.
Yep.
So
17. Yep.
That's just where I think that if he was healthy all of last year, he'd be easily inside the top 18. And the Sean Payton offense, which is just more hype. I love getting Javonte where I can. Like I said, maybe if his ADP, all signs are healthy, and he goes up there in the 3rd round, I'll have a little bit more hesitancy just because similar to Breece Hall, usually it takes a little bit for these guys to get fully back into NFL shape with their injuries when it comes to these soft tissue injuries. But like I said, I love Javonte where he's going. I think he can be a top. I mean, if he's fully healthy in the Sean Payton offense, he could be a top 12 running back, in my opinion. But I think his floor, if he can be healthy, is top 18 for sure.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of arguments against Javonte Williams as a player as far as the guy he's been when he's been on an NFL field to this point in his career. I think if he comes out week 1 and looks like his old self, I'm going to look stupid, and you're going to have a really good pick, and he's going to smash his ADP, just like Kody said. I have him at 28. Kody said, he has him at 17. ADP has him at 24 right now. I do want to point out that the guys in between 17 and 28, in my opinion, have very little separation. For example, I have James Cook at 27. If you wanted to make an argument for him over Dameon Pierce at 19, I'd probably listen to it, and you might not sound that stupid. So I think the bigger point here is that again, the fantasy community right now is really loading up on those wide receivers in early rounds, maybe taking one hero RB and then just loading up on 3 or 4 of these guys in rounds 4 through 8, which is the strategy I'm probably going to take in a lot of fantasy drafts this year. So I just wanted to point that out. But Javonte Williams, there was a really interesting article I read. I'm not going to go into all the numbers because they're way too much to follow in one sitting here. But Matthew Betts of the Fantasy Footballers, shout out. He looked at all of the ACL tears for relevant running backs from 2015 to 2021. The reason he took that sample was basically because of there was some modern way that they did ACL surgeries that changed in 2015. I am not a doctor, but this guy knows his stuff. So that's why he took this sample. It's not a huge sample, honestly. I think it was only 9 or 10 guys that he really got a good look at. But every single running back lost efficiency in his first season removed from an ACL tear compared to his previous career. No, yeah, exactly. It's not shocking, but again, no matter. I think that point is to get across the fact that I don't care how good Javonte Williams looks right now in camp. I don't think you can be the same guy you were before the ACL tear until 2 years removed, unless your name is Adrian Peterson. Everybody just remembers that season and thinks, oh, maybe this guy can do it. But no, nobody does it other than Adrian Peterson. It is every single running back loses efficiency. And under Sean Payton, like you said, running backs are extremely successful, but it's usually in a committee. Not one back has reached 300 touches under Sean Payton in his 17 years of coaching. I know we don't need Javonte to get to 300 touches to be even a top 12 back. I think you could be at 250, 280 maybe, and you could get there. But I think that's just a point to hammer home here is that Sean Payton really does not like to overload his running backs, even when they're completely healthy coming into the year. So Javonte coming off that ACL tear scares me that this is going to be basically a 50-50 split with Pirine. And I think that's my final point is that I really like Samaje Perine's value. I would rather wait a couple rounds and take him. I think you're going to get a very similar amount of production. I think Pirine has the chance to be the goal line guy here, much bigger. Again, a healthy guy coming into this year. I think they're going to ease Javonte in, and I think Perine's value is the biggest thing for me. If you want a piece of this Denver backfield, I'd wait a couple rounds and just take him.
I think if you want a guy that you feel confident playing the first 2 to 3 weeks of fantasy football, I would wait and draft Samaje Perine. If you want to take a running back who can win you your league, I would just pay up the price and pay for Javonte Williams. I think he has fantasy game-breaking ability, whereas Perine, I think we saw close to what his ceiling was in Cincinnati when Joe Mixon went down towards the end of last year. So if you get that for a week or two while Javonte is getting worked in, I feel like you're going to be really happy with drafting Perine. But if Javonte ends up getting up to that 65, 70% of carries, even, just at that, let's say 60, 65, it's going to quickly flip the other way where those guys who drafted Javonte waited a couple weeks, I think are going to be pretty happy they did that. So, again, it's just a bet on the player. I just think if he's healthy and going into next year, I'm really curious to see if he can stay healthy this year, where his ADP is going to be, because I think he could be a difference maker in Denver. I think he's scary good.
Yeah, if he gets 65% of the carries, I will be dead wrong. I'm just expecting it to be pretty close to a 50-50 split, maybe even slightly towards Perine at the beginning of the year, like you said.
Yeah. Eric, any questions?
Do you know what his ADP was last year? I feel like he was going pretty high last year, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think last year he was probably a third-round pick, maybe.
It was a big hurt when he got
late second, but
RB,
Melvin Gordon was still there.
RB.
So,
yeah.
So
that's
he was, a top 5 to 10 guy, but he was like a third-round pick, I'm pretty sure.
Yep. He was, when he went down, he was a running back you were counting on your offense for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right. Let's hear it. Your honor.
I'm going to go with Nick here. The ACL.
Yeah, fuck Javonte Williams and the Denver Broncos. He's going to do dog shit.
The ACL does still scare me a little bit. And like Nick said at the beginning of his argument, there are so many guys in this range that are really good running backs. So I think I would take a shot on one that isn't coming off an ACL injury.
Yeah. Well, these running backs aren't getting drafted around Javonte Williams.
Yeah, that's true. Where he is going, I hate that you guys like rank.
I don't.
Differently.
If I'm drafting and the positive news is nothing but Javonte, I would take him over probably
Okay.
almost all of these guys here. So yeah, I
But
am pretty firm on that. I
at
like
the 6'7"
Javonte Williams a
turn,
lot
there's no
if he's
running
gonna
back I'd take over Javonte. That's probably
if the
true.
positive news stays out. But yeah, it's always tough. That's where rankings get tough, is because like I see like guys going above Javonte to where it's just like I wouldn't spin the pick there. Like I'd rather wait the round. So those guys are always tough for me to rank because like yeah, logically they're probably going to outscore him. That's why their ADP's higher, why they're consistently ranked higher. But just me personally, I just wouldn't draft them where they go. So it's just that's where it kind of gets tough for me personally.
That's fair.
But Nick, you are up 2-1. You are leading us off with Rashad Penny. Not even going to lie. I'm going into my Rashad Penny argument with 0 notes because I want to be a fly on the wall at the start of this argument and see why you got Rashad Penny as finishing as inside a top 2 running back at the RB23. I'm assuming that you did this off half PPR, but let's hear your case. I have him ranked at 41. If NFC ADP is at 39, going basically in the middle of the 9th round, he's a flyer pick at that point. So I love hearing good stories on flyers, Nick. I want to hear why Rashad Penny should be my flyer.
Okay, so obviously, like you said, RB39 off the board right now. You don't got to take him at RB23. I think this is, again, just kind of me making a point of how much I like the player and the situation. I think it lines up really well here. I think I want to just – it's not going to dispel the injury-prone narrative, but I sort of want to just break it down. I think it makes it – if we look at all these injuries for what they are, it sort of – knocks down that wall of just, oh, he's injured every single year. Oh, this guy just can't stay healthy. Sometimes if a running back has 2 devastating injuries, he's going to get labeled injury prone. And some guys, it's just bad luck. I mean, tearing an ACL, breaking a bone in your leg, those are things you can't really control. I think guys that consistently have muscle strains are the ones you want to label a little bit more injury prone. The guys that have ligament injuries, devastating ligament injuries on non-contact injuries, those are just bad luck for the most part, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion, but in my opinion, those injuries are bad luck. So in 2018, Rashad Penny's first year, he missed 2 games with a minor knee strain, and he was backup. He was a backup most of the year, so he only missed 2 games. In 2019, he missed 3 games with a hamstring strain, and then tore his ACL late in the year. I believe it was week 15. And then he missed all of 2020 with recovery. I believe he actually played in 3 or 4 games towards the end of the year. But again, a really, really late ACL. Wasn't a clean ACL either, so he was out for most of the next year. I don't know if there was any COVID complications with 2020 either. Could have also come into play. I couldn't find anything on that. 2021 was his worst year for my argument. He missed 5 games with a calf injury and 1 game with a hamstring injury. So you have 3 soft tissue injuries in his career. Those are the only 3 soft tissue injuries he's had in a 5-year career as a running back. Maybe that's slightly above average, but I think that's probably about what you'd expect from a running back in a 5-year career. And then in 2022, again, the second devastating injury that he had was a broken tibia. Another injury I would consider just bad luck, probably very similar to the mechanism that we saw Tony Pollard break his leg in the San Francisco game in the playoffs. Player kind of tackled him from behind and pulled his leg down underneath him. Again, just bad luck, something that happens to guys like this a lot, I guess, but not something I would expect him to be more prone to than anybody else going into this year just because it happened to him last year. His career yards per carry is 5.7 on 330 carries, the highest in NFL history with a minimum of 750 carries. Rashad Penny's only at 330, so he does not qualify for this, but the highest in NFL history with a minimum of 750 is 5.4. So if Rashad Penny were to keep this up, he would be the best running back in NFL history on a yards per carry basis. That running back was Jamal Charles, by the way. Shout out to my favorite fantasy player of all time, even though he's a Kansas City Chief. You're my boy, Jamal Charles. He also received the first carry in camp last week. I know you don't want to read too much into that, but I think it just speaks to the point that when he is healthy, he will be the primary runner behind a fantastic offensive line on a great offense. He has league-winning potential. You don't have to take him at RB23. Take him in the 7th, 8th round, reach a round or 2, and while he's healthy, he will be an excellent running back. You know what? If he gets hurt, whatever. You move on to the next running back. Running backs get hurt all the time. I think while he's in your lineup, he's going to be excellent, though. That's just been hashed out to this point in his career. He's an incredible runner of the football on a team that makes average runners of the football look like really good runners of the football because they have to count for Jalen Hurts and this amazing offensive line.
Yeah, I think you painted your argument pretty well. Again, this argument is tough because I don't necessarily have any issue with where he's getting drafted. Like, if you want to take a shot on a late-round running back, you go a lot of wide receivers early. I think Penny's a fine guy to take a shot on in the 9th round. Those are a lot of just flyers anyway in most drafts. So that I don't necessarily have much of an issue with. I think your argument's valid. My only concerns with it would be they're probably going to do some kind of running back by committee. They brought DeAndre Swift in that I expect to get some pass-catching work. We'll see how much he's involved. You hope it's more than Detroit because you think that the player overall should have pretty good potential. I think he's still a little bit younger than Rashad Penny, maybe by maybe a year or two, maybe 3 at the most.
Probably a couple years, yeah.
Yeah, and then I cannot remember his name now, but I know Philadelphia, basically their 3rd-string running back or 2nd string they brought back.
Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott.
There you go.
Both those guys there.
Gainwell, well, unless they're playing the Giants, but Kenny Gainwell was the one that I was specifically concerned about. I just think that there's going to be a lot of a committee here. My concern, again, I'm not going to argue against taking the flyer on him. If you want to do that, that's your team. My concern is there's no shot I could have him ranked over guys with the caliber of Breece Hall, even coming off the injury. Cam Akers, who is going to be one of those running backs coming off a year or 2 of an ACL, should be at his healthiest. James Cook should have a lot of opportunity. Rachaad White should have a lot of opportunity. I've already made my case for Javonte. You're going to hear my case for Mattison. Like, these kind of guys, I can't just see myself ranking Penny over. That's basically the basis for my argument. Again, where he's getting drafted, take the flyer on him. Do not care about that. I couldn't sit across from you or from most people and try to defend that I would take him over, a good chunk of those guys that you have right behind him. And that's my main argument.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Besides Breece Hall, who a lot of the argument as to why I'm a little lower on him would be the same exact reasons I gave for Javonte Williams. Again, ACL, not going to be as efficient as he was last year, yada, yada. I don't have to rehash that. Cam Akers, Rachaad White, James Cook, Alex Mattison, Isaiah Pacheco. Those are all the guys that are right behind him in my ranks, and probably they're all ahead of him in the ADP. If all of those guys, including Penny, stayed healthy all year, you knew they were all going to stay healthy, who would you want?
And Rashad Penny's going to stay healthy?
Yes.
I'm probably going are we also going to say then that all the other Eagles running backs stay healthy? DeAndre Swift's healthy, Kenneth Gainwell stays healthy? Because if that's the case, sure. I'm probably going no injuries, probably Cam Akers or Alexander Mattison. Those are going to be my 1-2 flip and flop. And they're almost guaranteed.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about Mattison. We don't have to.
Yeah. I won't. You're right. Good point. Rachaad White, another guy I just see having a lot of opportunity in Detroit. I would say really those main guys. Like once we get down to 30, you're really just nitpicking. Like if you want to go him over Pacheco, I'm not going to argue with you. P. Ryan's a backup. McKinnon's a backup. Swift is his teammate. I would personally take over him, but if you want to go on the side of Penny, I get it. But that's just the way. Like me, when I'm drafting running backs, especially when I'm looking at these, mid-round guys, I just want to take guys I know are going to have opportunity, and that's going to be Cam Akers, Rachaad White, Javonte. Well, not Javonte, Alexander Mattison, those kind of guys. So again, that's the basis of my argument. I think, if Rashad Penny's really good from the 9th round, again, it's just one of those guys you're just like, damn, I got Penny in the 9th. No one believes in him besides me. So I get the feeling behind taking a guy like that too.
I just view him as the best runner of the football out of the running back room by quite a wide margin if he's healthy. We saw Miles Sanders last year have basically no targets. He had just above 1 target per game in his 17 games, and he had 15 carries a game. Pretty modest total. I think if Rashad Penny stays healthy all year, you could expect about 15 carries a game and maybe a target. And he had 1,269 yards and 11 touchdowns in 17 games. I think Rashad Penny's a better player than Miles Sanders. That's been, on an efficiency basis, that has been what is the case so far to their NFL careers. So I think you could bump those numbers up a little bit. And if you got that as late as you can get him, you would be a league winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So with ADP, let's slide on over here to the NFC ADP page. Like you're drafting. Like, see, this is where again rankings just get so difficult because you're never going to take them in the fifth round where you'd have to take those other guys I listed. Like that would just be an idiotic fantasy move that we're obviously not doing. So I'm going to hold back my question. I'm not going to continue with that. Eric, do you have any questions for us?
I do not.
All right, drum roll, please.
I am going to side with Kody on this one. If we got a little bit more news out of camp that he is more secure in that number one role, I'm just not quite buying it just yet. That first carry of the day didn't do it for me. I do think that you're right. He is probably the best pure runner of the football, but in general, that offense has never really just been a hand it to this guy and let him do all the work. I'm worried about Jalen stealing his touchdowns, and in general, I just think that where you're drafting him is definitely still value. I would pick him up in the ninth every day,
Yeah.
but I think that I don't buy that he's going to be the true number one option there.
Fair enough.
Yep, that's from my
Consensus agrees with you. So, yeah, I know I'm out on a limb there. Probably going to have him on basically every single one of my teams this year. So,
yeah, I love.
We'll see how it works out, but yeah,
I would say your Rashad Penny take. Like, I can't look at my rankings and be like, I have a late round running back that I'm excited to go draft. Like the ones Eric's taken part in, like we get into those later running backs, and I literally look at the board and like it's like, fuck, man, who am I going to add that I got to try and talk about and build value into? So I think it's super valuable just for fantasy in general to find a guy like a Rashad Penny that you can just bank in the back of your mind and know, even if you have to take him around earlier in the eighth, you think he's outperforming that easily. So I think that's also very valuable for a fantasy player to have that kind of belief in a later round player.
Yeah, and if you're in a non PPR league, huge bump for Penny. By the way, I might take him I would take him earlier, but I think you should consider him in the 6th or 7th round because he is going to be a lot more valuable in those formats.
Yeah. Also, since this is a good point in general, I believe the NFL banned somewhat of the Eagles' sneak play, like they can't push from behind.
I don't think they completely got rid of it. I don't think so.
Okay.
Did they do the read option thing? There was also, I read something that they were going to try to make a rule change to make doing actual read options like much more difficult, where the handoff has to be like to the side, not in front.
There is something like that, yes. I forgot what that is entirely, but yes, there is something you have to do your read option handoffs a specific way. I just thought I heard either saw a clip
when the ball is directly in front of you, like it would be for a read option, is no longer allowed. So you have to go to the one side or the other, so the quarterback can't look straight forward at the D line. And they're looking Justin Fields in the face and being like, "No, you're not going to be a franchise quarterback, and we've decided it." And I'm really upset.
Fair point.
Yeah.
All right, we are almost an hour into this, so we'll probably finish up about the hour mark. Let's get into Alexander Mattison. He is my last guy I'll be arguing in the affirmative for. So, obviously, I'm gonna go into this argument acting like he's going to be okay for the season. Obviously, if the injury is something more important, by the time you're listening to this, the rankings probably are going to be different anyway. But for me,
let's assume no injury.
Yeah, exactly. So where I have him ranked is assuming no injury. Sorry, I'm flipping between notes. I have him at number 18. ADP is at 22. Nick has him at 29, with a lot of those similar guys that we had in between Javonte and on the last ranking. So let me pull up my notes here. Basically, my thing for Alexander Mattison is he is obviously getting a lot of opportunity this season to kind of prove that the Vikings moving off of Dalvin Cook was a good move. Dalvin Cook is a guy who has, in 2021, he didn't get over 300 opportunities. That's because he only played in 13 games. Every other year of his career with the Vikings, he's gotten over 300 opportunities. Like Nick has mentioned, when you get to that number, almost the most inefficient running backs can still find fantasy value just based on that number of touches. And again, I don't want to keep running the Dalvin Cook narrative, but he did finish as the RB5, 3, 15, and 10 on this Vikings team over the past 4 years. And I think Alexander Mattison has been painted as, he's been like the best backup running back for fantasy for, probably 2 years now. Like, he's been the guy a lot of people will target just because Cook has somewhat of an injury past and Mattison has been able to fill in pretty well. So we'll go back to 2020. 2019 was his rookie year. There wasn't really a big gap where he filled in for a game for Cook. I believe that was Cook's season where he finished as the RB3 overall. I don't think he missed very many games that year. But starting in 2020, week 6, he took over for an injured Dalvin Cook, finishes the RB45, which is by far his worst performance. That was about his first big opportunity in the NFL. Week 17, he finishes the RB4 that season. That is the last year, so fantasy numbers are going to be skewed a little bit, but did get the opportunity and made something of it the last week of the year. In 2021, week 3, Dalvin misses, Mattison's the RB7. Week 5, Dalvin misses, Mattison's the RB9. Week 13, Dalvin misses, Mattison's the RB5, number 5 overall. So I'm not going to lie. Whenever I was doing my rankings, I thought I was going to be lower on consensus on Mattison just because I wasn't that excited until I actually got into the numbers and saw when he gets the full opportunity out of that backfield that he is actually able to make something of it. He's a very, very valuable fantasy asset. My only concern would be just now he may not be at the level of Dalvin Cook, and they may move to a little bit more of a passing offense where, let's say, instead of 300, those opportunities go down to 250, which makes him, maybe just slightly outperforms ADP. Whereas I think if he gets the opportunity Dalvin Cook has gotten over the past 4 years, he's smashing this ADP, probably has a chance to finish inside, the top 10 or 12 RBs, finishes an RB1 for your team. So I like Mattison quite a bit. Again, like I said, I didn't really think I was that impressed by the player. I got into the numbers. Got more excited the more numbers I looked at, and it probably moved him up about 6 or 7 spots in my rankings altogether just because of that. So Alexander Mattison, he's going around that Cam Akers, Rachaad White kind of territory right now in a lot of the mock drafts I've been doing. I think Mattison is the clear, maybe Cam Akers if you want to talk yourself into it, but I'm going Mattison every time over guys that he's going around.
All right, not a bad argument. I think those are kind of a lot of the points that I have heard when I've heard Mattison argued in the affirmative so far this offseason. A lot of them make sense. It's a good offense, and he has been good for filling in for Dalvin Cook when he has had to do it. I'm going to start off the top here. I believe he's a mediocre talent. He had a 4.67 40-yard dash coming out of college, 102nd overall pick out of Boise State, 4.9 career YPC in college, not great. Again, pretty mediocre coming out of college. He's nowhere near the Dalvin Cook level of player coming into the league. Mattison has also seen a pretty concerning dip in efficiency as his career has gone on here. His career yards per carry by year, we're going to start rookie year, and we're going to go to last year. It's been 4 seasons. 4.6, 4.5, 3.7, 3.8. His career yards per target, 8.2, 8.3, 5.8, 5.1. His breakaway run rate, 41.3, 34.8, 21.4, 5.3. This dip in efficiency with such low touch numbers is really troubling. Limited touches usually boost your per touch numbers for running backs, and he saw the fewest average defenders in the box last season out of his career so far. And like you said, Mattison's 6 career starts, filling in for Dalvin Cook. They were pretty impressive fantasy finishes, but let's look at those games a little bit closer. He had, like you said, 6 total starts that he has filled in for Dalvin Cook in those 4 years. 2020 against Atlanta, they were the 6th best run defense. 2020 against Detroit, they were the 28th best run defense. 2021, he had his last 4 starts, like you mentioned, against Seattle, the 17th best run defense. Detroit, the 28th best run defense. Detroit again, the 28th best run defense. And the Los Angeles Rams, the 6th best run defense. In his 4 starts against Detroit were 3 of those 6 starts. So 4 starts against Detroit and the 1 against Seattle, who was a middling run defense. He has averaged 26.1 points per game. In his 2 starts against good run defenses, he has at 10 points per game even. He has really taken advantage of some cushy matchups in those games that he's gotten into for Dalvin Cook. And I think at the end of the day, if you're a mediocre talent in this league, it doesn't matter if there isn't a guy on the roster that you look at and say, oh, man, that guy is going to get touches for the Minnesota Vikings this year. They're going to find a way to replace you. We found a couple years ago, I remember Myles Gaskin and who was the other guy? Mike Davis was getting pushed up in drafts because they were the only guys in their backfield that were going to get touches. they both bombed because they weren't good, and their teams just found other guys to touch the ball. Atlanta turned Cordero Patterson into a running back because they were so tired of giving the ball to Mike Davis. Myles Gaskin, the Dolphins went out and signed some guys off the street that just performed better, had some more juice. They were younger. I think Mattison's going to be in a little bit more of a committee in a pass-happy offense, and there are some other guys I like a lot more. I just don't see a ton of upside here from the player.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys you listed are all, not even close to NFL level, not close to NFL level talents, but they're not anything. Their team's never committed to be these are going to be the guy. The Vikings have come out and said Mattison looks like he's ready to be a 3-down running back. Well, again, just training camp news, not trying to read into the hype too much, but
yeah,
even if you're looking at an inefficient guy who's getting 300 opportunities, he's going to outperform the running back 18 or whatever 22 he's going in NFC ADP. So that's just the case there. Dalvin Cook also gets a decent amount of pass catching opportunity that now completely opens up to Alexander Mattison. Yeah, the numbers don't look that great, but it's also a lot different whenever you are the true number one running back and you know you're getting the ball versus being thrown into games randomly or just having to fill in when the number one guy gets injured. So I'm not saying that you're going to draft Alexander Mattison and he has Javonte Williams potential. That's not the argument I'm trying to make here. I'm saying you're drafting Alexander Mattison, NFC ADP at number 22, and there's no chance he finishes outside of top 24 running back. So where you're drafting him, you're drafting safer guys. You can maybe take a shot on some younger guy that you think can break out, has a higher ceiling. But the way I see it, again, Mattison's not finishing outside the top 24 running backs as long as he stays healthy. I would say on a per-game basis, he's not finishing outside the top 24 running backs. If he stays healthy the entire season, clearly not finishing outside the top 24. So I just think his value is perfect where he's getting drafted. I would draft him right where he's at. I'd even take him over a couple of the other guys he's going around.
Yeah, I would agree. Decently high floor. Probably, if you told me he finished the season RB24, stayed healthy, I wouldn't be that surprised. But I just see an extremely, extremely capped ceiling. And in this space, again, like I said, my strategy is going to be picking 3 or 4 guys I think can hit, hoping 1 or 2 of them do. And then you have some really difference-making running backs, and Alexander Mattison's just not that. Not a special player. Hasn't been a special player. Wasn't drafted to be. And I think there are some other guys in the room that are going to take work away from him.
Like who?
That's
Dwayne
actually
McBride
my
has Dwayne McBride has some really good explosive numbers in his college career. Ty Chandler was a really good pass catching back. Mattison's been horribly inefficient in the passing game, so I think he could be the third down back. And Kene Nwangwu I butchered that pronunciation, so I apologize. Again, another guy that has much more explosive ability than Alexander Mattison, and I think could factor in on first and second down if Mattison is as inefficient as he's been the last 2 years.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any way that any of those guys are touching the field over Alexander Mattison. And if you're drafting for the first quarter of your season, there's no chance any of them are taking him off the field for the first 4 games. If he's that terrible, then you're going to know really fast on that you just wasted a pick in that middle round and you're going to be able to move off of him. I just don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that there's going to be opportunity there. It's a decent offense. And those guys do not scare me at all. They've committed to Alexander Mattison. They told him the team is his this year, at least at the running back position. I'm going to stand by that. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he's horribly inefficient. Then you feel okay dropping him, and it's not that big of a deal. If he ends up hitting and he can finish high, you're happy with it. Where he's going, I think, like I said, that's his
fifth
floor.
Round. I mean,
that's his floor.
That's a decent investment. 5th round pick. I mean, you're dropping him. I mean, that was a big investment you made.
If you have to. I'm not drafting a guy in the 5th round that I'm expecting to drop. I'm just saying if he's as bad as you are saying that he can be, you can drop him in from the 5th round because he's just a terrible player that didn't pan out. I don't think that that's the case. I think that you're drafting him at his floor, and he has potentially top 14, top 15 potential if touchdowns go his way. Any questions, Eric?
Clearly disagree, so I don't have any other rebuttals. Go ahead, Eric.
Give me a drum roll.
Okay.
I am kind of split on this one. I don't fear any of the running backs that you named, like Kody said. However, I also don't fear Alex Mattison. but he does get to play the Lions twice this year. He gets to play us twice this year. I don't think either of our run defenses are going to be particularly stout. So I think I actually am going to lean with Kody once again here for Alex Mattison.
I'll take it.
Please.
That's a tough one. I mean, I feel like Nick put up a really good argument on that one. So kudos to Nick.
I just don't think I don't think any of those guys, like the rookie, I don't know much about. Like you said, Dwayne McBride, maybe he can take over that
Hey,
role.
if he
but
does, that was a nice pull from Justin and I in our dynasty league that we had together.
I don't think one of those guys is going to overtake him. I just think if all of those guys
As a committee,
combine to have
that's
10 touches a game, Alex Mattison needs it all, or he will not be good. In all of the games that he replaced Dalvin Cook that we were talking about that he played well, he's getting 25 touches a game. I mean, if that number's 10 to 15, he's not even a startable asset. So I mean that's how I view it anyway.
The Vikings do tend to do a one running back set though. At least they have obviously with Dalvin Cook. So that's the offense I planned for them to go into the season.
Dalvin Cook was a top 5 running back for 5 years, and Alex Mattison is not even a top 20
Who'd they have before
running back.
Dalvin Cook again? Oh, yeah, that Adrian Peterson guy. He wasn't too good, was he?
I think that was more a product of. If you want to talk coaching staff, Kevin O'Connell is a Rams disciple. They have been a very big running back by committee team. They brought in Sony Michel off the street, and he was their starter in the playoffs. And he split time with Cam Akers towards the end of the day. I don't think Kevin O'Connell has the traditional view of the running back position.
So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I will love to revisit this Alexander Mattison at the end of the year because that's fine. 300 opportunities. He can be as mediocre as he wants.
He's not going to get near 300 opportunities.
What's your over-under? What's your over-under on his opportunities?
240? I don't know.
240 opportunities.
I'd say I'd take the under on 240 personally.
All right, there we go. Well, we haven't officially named it or put it on a podcast, but we'll do a little beer bet on Alexander Mattison, total opportunities, 240 over-under. I'll take the over by a lot. Lock it in, folks.
What, do you get an injury disclaimer or
yeah,
you baking that in?
I mean, yeah, I'll buy you a beer if he gets hurt week 1 and this bet just goes to complete shit. So
right.
if that's the case, that's fine. I mean, I'm drafting him in the 5th round to be my RB2, so.
Go ahead. I'll take Rashad Penny 3 rounds later, and he'll be much better. So that's fine.
That's fine. That's all right. We'll see about that. All right. Any final comments from?
Of all my picks, that's the one I feel the worst about. Not gonna lie.
Really, I'm honestly surprised that the Alexander Mattison hate is so high. I feel like I don't know who else you're. That's fine. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here.
Don't make Justin Jefferson
Fournette off the street. Bring in anybody.
Well, they don't want to pay a running back. I think that's why Dalvin Cook's not there.
Yeah, well, okay. That's fine.
You're not paying Leonard.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You do have a point.
You don't have you're going to give him $800,000. You're not going to pay him.
Yeah, you got a good point.
If Leonard Fournette ends up on the Minnesota Vikings and replaces Alexander Mattison, I'll buy you a bucket of beers. If that's the case.
I'll take it. I'm not risking anything extra. I'm writing that down in the bet right now. So
All right. Peace out, everybody. That wraps up running backs. We'll be back with wide receivers tomorrow. Peace out.
Good stuff.